I've had the Panasonic Lumix DMC-TS5 right here for several years, and I really love the camera, and I decided to buy the Panasonic Lumix TS5 because it has HD movie mode in 60 frames a second. So it has 1080p 60 frames a second and 720p 60 frames a second. This did high def, but only at 30 frames a second. It also, this one, is supposed to have manual exposure mode. And this one also does time-lapse. So for those three reasons, I decided to buy the Panasonic Lumix TS5. If you go into the settings, and you choose motion picture, and you choose record quality, you'll see it has, let me go through all of these, has 1080 60 frames a second with GPS information, which is pretty cool. 1080 60 frames a second without the GPS information. 1080 60i interlaced with GPS information. 60i without it. 720p 60 frames a second with GPS information. And 720 60 frames a second without GPS information. 1080 60 frames a second with a lower bit rate, and again with a lower bit rate, and it keeps going on. So the one I really wanted to use was 1080 60 with GPS information. I didn't even know there was a with GPS information, but if I wanted to use that, that's great. So what happened was I took some movies and I downloaded it to my Macintosh, and it won't recognize it. No matter what I do, it won't recognize it. So I had to switch to MP4, and with MP4, my Mac recognizes it, but here are my menu choices. 1080, 30 frames a second, 720, 30 frames a second, and 640, but whatever, who cares, 30 frames a second. So those are your only menu choices for MP4, which really is a huge, huge, huge disappointment. Next disappointment, manual exposure mode. So let's say I'm going to record and I choose to go to manual exposure mode. Down in the lower part of the screen you see f3.3 1/60th of a second. So I expected to somehow be able to change that, and the menu or the thing says to hit this up arrow on the right and then hit the arrow to the right, and you can see if I hit that arrow I get F10. If I hit the left arrow I get F3.3. Those are your only choices, F10 or F3.3. Those are your only choices for aperture. If I choose F3.3 and then hit the up arrow, I get this, which lets you change the bracketing essentially, and say I do plus or minus 1 and whatever, and then if I take a picture from here, it takes 3 pictures. If I go look at those pictures, so I got one picture that's normal. Unfortunately this is pretty dull and dim in here. One picture that is darker and one picture that is lighter. That's your manual control, which I think is that's totally not what I expected to get for manual control. I expected to be able to set my shutter speed to whatever I wanted and my aperture to anything between whatever the camera can handle. My third disappointment was, if I go back to mode, I was looking all over through these menu choices for time-lapse and couldn't find them. So if I go back here and go to program, time-lapse is hidden in the menus. And time-lapse, I looked for it in motion picture here, it's not there. Time-lapse creates a series of images, it doesn't create a motion picture. So it's under record, and it's way down these menus. It's on the 4th page, time-lapse shot. If I choose time-lapse, I get to choose a starting time, which is cool. I get to choose a shooting interval, which the lowest you can go is 10 seconds between shots. It goes up to 20. If I go the other way, it goes up to 20. It goes by 10 seconds up to 1 minute, and then it goes 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, all the way up to 30 minutes. And then you get to set an image count. And the highest number you can set, the lowest number you can set is 10. The highest you can set is 1,000. At 30 frames a second, that's going to compress whatever video you take, or whatever series of time-lapse shots you take, down to 33 seconds of video. If you take pictures at 10-second intervals like this, and you take 1,000 of them, or that's 166 minutes of elapsed time. So if you want to take longer, you're going to have to change this, change this to be 20, so that'll give you double that, or 30, that'll be triple that. So yes, it can record for a long time, but it's a long interval between things. And in my experience with time-lapse, half a second is great for if you're driving along and you want to capture a time-lapse of a trip, or if you are taking pictures of construction workers at a construction site where they're actively moving around doing stuff. Half a second is what you want. This is terrible to have just 10 seconds. I'm really hugely disappointed with this camera, and I'm really regretting the decision to buy it, because everything I thought it was going to improve over this camera isn't there.